There's a gourmet vegetable you can plant once, then harvest for 15, 20 years or more. It's easy to grow, it's among the very first vegetables of spring, and it's an absolute luxury. If there's one crop that rewards patience and then keeps on rewarding you, it's got to be none other than asparagus. And it all starts with these. Today we're going to start a new asparagus bed together and set ourselves up for those eagerly anticipated spears. We had best get going. Asparagus is very easy to grow, but it absolutely insists on one thing, and that is a weed-free start. These are delicate, dainty plants, at least early on, so the least we can do is give them a nice, clean start, free of unruly weeds. Now, perennial weeds are the real enemy here, things like bindweed or couch grass that kind of creep underground and pop up here and there. It's really important to get them out now because asparagus will be in the ground for 20 years or potentially more. And it's going to be a lot harder to get these weeds out once the plants are established. So spending time now is really invaluable. Thankfully, this bed is very weed-free indeed, and it's also a spot that enjoys a good amount of sunshine. Asparagus will cope with a little bit of shade for part of the day, but you're always going to get the biggest, best and earliest spears if you've got somewhere that's basking in full, glorious sunshine. Asparagus loves a free draining soil, so it's often grown commercially in areas with lovely sandy soil. So if you have a sandy soil and often have the problem of it drying out quickly and wondering what on earth you can grow there, asparagus is the perfect crop for it. In commercial farms, they're often grown in great big trenches raised up to really help with that drainage and get the very best results. Now, I've improved my soil here by adding plenty of well-rotted compost, but also a kind of sandier bagged soil as well that really helps with this drainage. And you can see it here in my hands. It's got a lovely kind of sandy, free draining texture. Crucially, it's also beautifully fertile. So it's that lovely sweet spot that should give good, strong growth. My soil can get really soggy in winter, which could cause the asparagus roots, or crowns as they are called, to rot, and we don't want that. So planting them in a raised bed really helps with that. Just like the asparagus farmers growing them in trenches, this will improve drainage. It'll dry out quicker in the spring, which means the bed will warm up quicker in the spring, and I'll get my spears that little bit faster. Improving the soil now with plenty of organic matter to help with drainage and just getting things prepped to perfection really pays off, because as I said, these will be in the ground for a couple of decades, so it's well worth it. I reckon it's time to plant, don't you? And I'm going to fill this entire bed with asparagus, so it really will be my dedicated asparagus bed for decades to come. Now, the quickest route to harvest is to plant crowns or roots like these. Now, these are about 1 year old. You can actually buy them even slightly larger and longer, and those would be 2-year-old crowns. These will give you a bit of a head start on asparagus that started from seed, although I will be showing you how to do that in a bit because it is slightly cheaper. And I'll also be sharing some of my recommended varieties that are nice and strong, the very best to grow. The crowns can be planted anytime the soil is workable, from winter right through to spring. And I kind of think that the crowns here look a bit like kind of rubbery spiders, don't they? But these are the start of glorious things to come. There are two options for planting our crowns. We can make individual planting holes, or we can kind of scrape across a little trench like this. I'm going to dig it out so it's between about 4 to 6 inches or 10 to 15 centimetres deep. Now, the spacing would be about, if we were doing it in a block, maybe 18 inches or 45 centimetres apart in both directions. And if you're planting them in rows or trenches like we're going to do, you can go a little bit wider, but also put them a little bit closer as well. What we don't want is our roots to kind of be constrained or going back on themselves. We want to splay out the roots so they can really stretch their legs, and you'll see what I mean by that shortly. So I'm just flattening out the bottom of our trench here, and now for each individual crown I'm going to make a little mound. Now, this isn't really essential for such a free draining mix that I've got here, but A, it's fun, and more importantly like that, it's going to enable me to splay out the roots so I can sort of put them so they go along the mound and out like the kind of spokes of a bicycle. There we go. And just nestle it down like that. Helps me get a nice even result. Now these are only 1 year old, these roots, as I said, and they're not especially long. You can get some really long ones, and this is where this kind of mound and then splaying of roots technique really comes into its own. What we don't ever want is the roots to kind of fold back in on themselves. We want them to stretch out in all directions like that. So that's the kind of masterpiece of advice here. Here we are. With them all laid out, I'm just going to cover the trench back over. Now, if you were growing lots of asparagus in nice long rows, you might want to space them about 2 or even 3 foot up to sort of 1 metre apart, and that way you'd be able to get in easily, weed them, and of course pick those delicious spears. It would make maintenance a bit simpler. Right, that's it, and now on for the next trench. We're doing this in spring, and spring has very much gloriously sprung. It's a joyous time to be doing this kind of work, but if you're making your asparagus trenches or planting each little crown separately in the depths of winter, well, you might want to mark out exactly where you planted, because it has been known for people to plant them and then forget where they are and then either dig them up or, worse still, hoe them off thinking they're weeds. While I finish planting here, let me tell you about what variety I've chosen to grow. Now, variety selection is so important because obviously these are going to be in the ground for so long, so ideally we want to get it right first time. Now, I've gone for a hybrid variety which will produce thicker spears and plenty of them, and I've also gone for an all-male variety called, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Ginlim. All male varieties are generally more vigorous, and that's because they don't waste any of their energy producing berries. All of that energy goes into producing stronger plants and ensuring better harvests year after year. All of the plant's energy from those leaves will go into recharging the crown. Nothing's wasted, so it builds better harvests spring after spring. That said, the red berries are very attractive, so if you're not too worried about that and just want something that looks darn good as well as being darn tasty, then a traditional variety would suit just fine. These asparagus are going to be really small to start with, especially this first year, so there's no point wasting all this space. So what I'm going to do is just pop a line of spinach plants I've rescued from elsewhere in the garden down the middle here, just to make the most use of space while these are still establishing and young. And with everything planted, I can now water the stuff in to settle the soil and compost around the roots of our asparagus so it beds in nicely. And I'll need to kind of keep a close eye on things and be sure to water in dry weather to help these establish, because they haven't got the extensive root system just yet. Once the shoots push through, I'm probably going to follow on with a bit of a mulch of organic matter. That could be more compost or perhaps more likely some dried grass clippings. What that will do is help to suppress weeds, lock in that all-important moisture, and generally feed the soil some more and help everything establish. Starting asparagus from seeds is a wonderfully economical way to start off an asparagus patch. They do take longer to get going, but if you've got a big area to cover, then this is probably the best way to do it, to save a pretty penny. And for such a delicate, frothy looking seedling, well, they're actually surprisingly easy to sow and grow this way. Late winter and on into spring is the perfect time to sow asparagus. And actually this time of year, with it getting warmer and lighter, well, they're going to grow pretty quickly and easily. Now, I'm just using a general all-purpose potting mix to which I've added just a little bit of sand and vermiculite just to open it out for that drainage. And I'm sowing into this plug tray here, which has got 10 plugs, purely because, rather conveniently, our packet has 10 seeds in it. And to sow, the seeds are actually quite a good size, so they're easy to pick up individually like this, and it's just one into each little plug like that before covering them over. The seedlings can be a little bit on the slow side to pop up to a couple of weeks, But you can speed things along by bringing the tray indoors to germinate in the warm so they don't get that drop in nighttime temperature. That'll help a bit. Once the seedlings have appeared, bring them back outside or into the greenhouse or cold frame to grow on, and once the seedlings have filled those plugs, they can then be carefully removed and potted on into a pot this kind of size. Grow them on in those pots, and then they can be planted outside as soon as they fill those pots, usually in kind of early summer, and you'll be planting them at exactly the same spacings as if you were planting those crowns. However you decide to start your asparagus off, you'll be getting a plant here that will keep you fed for decades to come, and at a time of year when there's little else to pick from the garden, a real plant once, harvest forever crop. Here are a couple of asparagus plants that are already established. Now they don't look like much now, they're just kind of bits of sticks, last year's stems. It's very early spring at the time of filming, so I didn't expect to see much in the way of spears pushing through yet, but I had a scratch around and there is one here, look, that we can see that's just about to push through the surface, so there'll be others waiting in the wings here. That's very exciting, and it's a delicious taste of things to come. So I've cheated a bit. I've been to the supermarket and got these asparagus spears to show you what these actually are. Asparagus spears are just the new shoots that are pushed through the ground, and eventually, if left alone, they will grow into this most beautiful, decorative, feathery, ferny-like foliage, which is really ornamental and very attractive to have in the garden. But these aren't just pretty things. They're like great big solar panels, harvesting the sun's energy and then drawing that energy back down into the crown of the plant below ground level, and that's important. We're going to have to be patient after planting asparagus because we want the crown below ground to start bulking out and get bigger before we take a harvest. So I'm afraid we need to be a bit patient. Think of it a bit like an investment. We're going to let these ferny fronds charge up the crown below ground to make it grow bigger and bulkier so we get ultimately bigger harvests. It's an investment that will pay off, but we have to be patient. So in the first 2 years after planting, we're not going to harvest anything at all. In the third year, we can take some harvests, but we'll limit it to a 4-week window. And then from the 4th year onwards, we can blow the harvest window wide open and take our spears over a 2-month period, usually from spring when they first start coming up, until about midsummer. Now, if you think all that patience is a bit frustrating, just think of it like a fruit tree. You plant your fruit tree, then you have to wait a few years before you get your first fruits. It's the same thing. And just like a fruit tree, we'll be enjoying these beautiful spears for a couple of decades at least. Once your asparagus is established, it's incredibly low maintenance actually. Because the foliage is very kind of airy and not very lush, it doesn't actually need that much water, though of course in very dry weather and while plants are establishing, it is important to keep them well watered. For my established clump here, what I'm going to do is just pull out any weeds, and then what I've got here is just some well-rotted bark chippings as a bit of a mulch to lay around the clumps here, just to kind of keep the weeds down and to provide very slow release fertiliser over the course of the growing season. The only real pest of asparagus is the appropriately named asparagus beetle. This can nibble at the leaves and indeed the spears and lays lots of little rows of eggs, but really the damage is mainly just cosmetic, and asparagus beetles have plenty of natural predators including ladybugs or ladybirds and lacewings, which will devour those eggs as well, and who doesn't like eggs for breakfast? But if you do come across any of the beetles, you can always just pick them off and then drop them into a bucket of water to see them off. I really can't wait to see this bed come into life in a few years' time. And when I do, well, I'll be harvesting them kind of like this sort of size, about the size of a pencil or a bit thicker than that. But the important thing is that the bud at the top here is still tightly closed like that. To harvest spears, just either cut them off or snap them off near the base, as simple as that. In warm weather, you may need to check every day because they do pop up rather fast, and you'll need to keep on cutting them to keep them coming, which is a delicious problem to have, right? Any gluts of asparagus, lucky you, can always be blanched and then frozen, or perhaps pickled, or even turned into a very high-end stock. Don't be tempted to push your luck. Do stop picking once that allotted harvest window has closed, and for established clumps that is 2 months. And after that point, let those spears grow up into those beautiful feathery fronds to recharge the crown for next year. It's a beautiful rhythm, not so much eat, sleep, rave, repeat, as eat, rest, recharge, repeat, year after year. The tall, feathery, flamboyant nature of asparagus makes it fantastic as a temporary seasonal screen, but the large feathery fronds can sort of collapse over, especially after rain, and sort of go over surrounding crops. So one option to keep them upright would be to drive in a stake and then put some string around them to kind of keep them upright, or for longer rows you could kind of set up something a little bit like this and just keep the fronds growing in here to keep them in bounds. By mid-autumn, the ferns naturally yellow and start dying back. Leave them until they have fully died back so they can concentrate as much time and energy as possible into recharging the crowns for next year's harvest. Once they've died back, you can then just simply cut them down to within 1 inch or 2 of ground level. You can then remove any weeds as they appear throughout the winter and early spring before going in with your topping of organic mulch to nourish the new crop that's just about to come, and so we come full circle. Freshly picked asparagus is in a league of its own. Pan fry it, lightly steam it, grill it, toss it into pasta, or simply serve it up with a good drizzle of extra virgin olive oil, maybe a squeeze of lemon juice and some salt. Absolutely delicious. Picked minutes before cooking, those spears are sweet, delicate, and quite unlike anything you'll find in the supermarket. And knowing they'll come back spring after spring with barely any effort from you, well, that's gardening at its very best. Are you starting your first asparagus bed this season? Or perhaps you're already harvesting those first delicious springtime spears? Well, let me know in the comments below. Spring has only just got started, so if you haven't yet fully planned out your garden, there is still plenty of time. Why not take advantage of the free 7-day trial of our garden planner over here to get going? Really get stuck in with it. And I will catch you next time.